Loki. Episode 1, Glorious Purpose. Open on New York City during the 2012 invasion. I.e., this Loki knows nothing of the events of Thor: The Dark World, Thor: Ragnarok, or Avengers: Infinity War. Clips from Avengers and Avengers Endgames recall Loki's escape using the Tesseract during the time heist. Thor's voice can be heard yelling, "Where's Loki?" over the Marvel Studios intro. Loki is transported to the Gobi Desert in Mongolia, where his shackles are broken. He is approached by several locals, and immediately proclaims his divinity. A time panel opens, revealing 3 soldiers from the Time Variance Authority, who begin to scan the cube. As Loki tries to take it, another soldier appears, identifying a time sequence violation. The leader takes note of the trend in the time variance and places Loki under arrest for crimes against the sacred timeline. Loki again uses his godly prowess to assert authority, but the leader places him into a time warp that causes him to move at 1/16th speed. Allowing ample time for the arrest, the leader calls for the timeline to be reset before leaving. With the Loki variant, Loki steps through the time panel into the main office of the TVA. The leader, Hunter B-15, places the Tesseract into evidence before placing Loki in a cell, where he is disrobed by a droid before being dropped into a room in a TVA jumpsuit. He is asked to sign a document confirming everything he has ever said. After signing, Loki is dropped to the next room, and is asked to identify himself once again before stepping through a machine that captures his temporal aura. Loki then enters a room where he is given a ticket made to wait in line. Loki sees a cartoon of Miss Minutes, who describes the multiverse war, in which several timelines battled for supremacy, nearly resulting in the total destruction of everything until the Timekeepers merged the multiverse into the sacred timeline. Because Loki purposefully stepped out of the sacred timeline, he is now identified as a variant. Loki's escape with the Tesseract triggered a Nexus event, which could severely alter the sacred timeline and lead to another multiversal war. The goal of Loki's arrest is to place him back in the sacred timeline after his trial. Ahead of Loki, another variant is disintegrated for not having his ticket. Loki anxiously scrambles for his as the title sequence starts. In Aix-en-Provence, France, AD 1549. Mobius B. Mobius is being debriefed on a Nexus event that led to the deaths of a hunter and several Minutemen. Mobius takes note of the stab sounds as a hunter tells him this is the 6th attack in the past week. A child enters the church, and Mobius asks her who killed the men. She points to a stained glass image of the devil. Mobius notices her teeth are a creeish blue, and discovers that the variant left behind bubblegum for the children in 16th century France. Before setting the reset charge, Mobius is informed of Loki's apprehension. In the courtroom, Loki admonishes the judge for his arrest, assigning blame for the timeline event to the Avengers. Loki claims to have identified 2 different Tony Starks by scent, bringing him to the conclusion that the Avengers were time-traveling in an event to stop him from ascending to God King. Mobius enters the courtroom and sits in on Loki's testimony. Loki requests a task force to stop them, but is informed by the judge that their actions were supposed to happen. His escape was not. Loki demands to speak directly to the Timekeepers, but is again requested a plea by the judge. Loki tries to use his powers, but cannot use magic within the TVA. Loki is found guilty and assigned to be reset. Before Loki is taken out, Mobius approaches the bench. and the judge reluctantly gives him permission to go ahead with his plan. Mobius takes Loki down to his office, where Loki again admonishes the timekeepers and the TVA, as he had never heard of them before. Mobius tells him it's because until he escaped, he had been living within his set path. Loki tries to step out of line, but Mobius resets him and seats him. Loki explains his plan to conquer Earth once he returns, followed by Asgard, the Nine Realms, and space. Loki explains his motives while Mobius intently listens. Mobius plays back Loki's greatest hits, recalling his apprehension by the Avengers. Mobius shows Loki the memory of him stabbing Phil Coulson with the scepter, as well as several people he killed and tortured in his pursuit for power. Mobius plays back a memory of Loki on an airplane, where it is revealed that Loki was, in this sacred timeline, the infamous hijacker D.B. Cooper, who takes a hostage with a bomb threat. He steals the plane, along with the ransom, before jumping from the cockpit and taking the Bifrost Bridge back to Asgard. Mobius then shows Loki the timeline after, had he not escaped, up to the death of Frigga. Mobius finally identifies Loki for his purpose, not to rule, but to conquer. Loki shows signs of understanding the pain he has caused to others and himself. Mobius helps him to his feet as a hunter enters the room to tell him about the situation. The hunter tells Mobius that while he was talking to Loki, they lost another unit. Mobius goes back into the room and finds Loki missing with his time twister. Loki finds the Tesseract in a drawer with several Infinity Stones from different timelines. Loki is amazed at how the treasures he sought are being used in an office as paperweights, and becomes completely enamored of the Time Variance Authority. As hunters enter to disintegrate Loki, he loops back to his cell, where he watches forward in time to his mother's death. He later fast-forwards to Odin's death in Ragnarok. He finally finds his death at the literal hands of Thanos in Infinity War, ending Loki's file. A hunter fights Loki, who is able to disarm her and place the time twister on her. Loki sits alone in his cell and is approached by an armed Mobius. The two have an honest conversation, where Loki admits to his own manipulative nature. Mobius asks about the Tesseract, and Loki laughingly proclaims that even Infinity Stones can't be used in the TVA. Mobius tells Loki that he cannot offer salvation, but could use his help in tracking a fugitive variant who has been killing his Minutemen. Mobius claims that the variant they are hunting is him, deduced by the horned figures found throughout, the same as Loki's horned crown. In Salina, Oklahoma, 1858, 4 hunters emerge from a panel and discover a futuristic item dug into the ground. One hunter tells another to disintegrate it. Their word is prune, as they notice a cloaked figure in the distance. Amid a green mist, the figure drops a lantern, lighting oil on the ground ablaze. The Minutemen are set on fire as one crawls aboard to activate the reset charge, but is ultimately killed as the figure takes the charge. No mid- or post-credit scenes. Episode 2, The Variant. In Oshkosh, Wisconsin, 1985. At a Renaissance fair, TVA Minutemen emerge. A variant is identified and followed by the team into a tent. The commander is placed under a green spell, and she takes out the team while the variant watches. As she is released from the spell, the variant kills the last Minuteman and takes his tracker along with the unconscious commander. Through a time panel. Loki intro. Miss Minutes quizzes Loki on Nexus events. He angrily bats at her hologram with his magazine until she disappears into a monitor. Mobius picks up Loki and gives him a TVA jacket. They meet with Hunter B-52, who tells them about the attack. Enough tempera aura has been collected to identify the fugitive as a Loki variant, but they are unsure which one. According to Mobius, several Loki variants have been pruned in different timelines, each with a different style. Mobius reminds the team that Loki is with them as an expert on the variant they are hunting. When Loki suggests that getting his powers back might entice him to betray the team, Mobius teases him with an audience before the Timekeepers. Intrigued, Loki follows. The team arrives at the Ren Fair shortly after the event, so as not to further damage the flow of time. Mobius and the team quiz Loki further on TVA protocols. At the scene, Loki explains his variant's intentions and suggests an ultimatum, which Mobius refuses. The reset charge goes off, pruning anything from outside the present timeline. TVA bodies, weapons, etc. Back at the TVA, in Judge Rinslayer's office, Mobius discusses the mission. The two draw comparisons between Loki's behaviors and each other's. Mobius asks if there is a possibility that this Loki variant is acting differently than the others they have caught because he truly wants to be better. The judge proclaims the only possibility of that would be if the Timekeepers decree it. She gives him one more chance with Loki. Mobius signs the event report and leaves. Outside the judge's office, Loki defensively tries to explain his deception in the field. Mobius identifies his naivete in believing that Loki's need for validation would drive him to want to help. He then calls out Loki on his plan to hijack the sacred timeline after meeting with the Timekeepers. Mobius assigns Loki to review the previous variant's crimes in an effort to figure him out. Loki reads through the papers, noticing the pattern of murdering the Minutemen and stealing their reset charges. Bored, he tries to goad a librarian into letting him read other files, but she provides him with another dossier filled with Loki variant case files. Loki comes across the case file for the destruction of Asgard in Ragnarok, which hasn't happened yet to Loki's knowledge. He missed that part on his file. Loki tells Mobius that his variant is likely hiding out in apocalypses. Loki and Mobius discuss the chaotic alterations of a predetermined outcome, which could produce a new timeline. He suggests trapping the Loki variant in Ragnarok. Mobius laughs off Loki's theory but humors the conversation. In Pompeii, Italy, just prior to the surge eruption of Mt. Vesuvius in 79 AD, Loki and Mobius stand in the city awaiting its destruction. To play a prank on the townspeople, Loki frees some goats and proclaims, in Latin, that he is there to bring dark tidings, and that they will all die. At that moment, the volcano erupts. Mobius picks up no time variance energy in Loki's actions, even though he might have created a nexus event. The apocalypse of the eruption creates the perfect hiding spot. Amazed, Mobius returns them to the TVA, now chasing a new hunch. Mobius and Loki investigate doomsday disasters to pinpoint exact locations where the variant might be hiding. The two take a break and Mobius shares his love for jet skis with Loki. Even though he can never own one, Mobius keeps a magazine from the 1990s on jet skis to remind him of what they are fighting for. Loki begins to talk once again about the Timekeepers and how they created the TVA and Mobius. Mobius shoots back with the question of how Loki came to be. Extrapolating from that how Loki's existence as a god of Asgard is no different. Mobius goes on to poignantly express the chaos of existence, and how his disregard of overthinking helps him to get on with his purpose in life. Loki goes on to discuss the concept of freedom in a timeline where past, present, and future are predetermined by the timekeepers. This leads to his next query as to how it will end. And without an answer from Mobius, Loki seems to have made his point. Mobius goes on to express the timekeeper's goal to unite the future into the sacred timeline so that the TVA and all of existence can meet peacefully at the end of time. When Loki reminds Mobius of a name he once called him, Mobius remembers the gum from the previous episode. They track the gum to a time period and search it for doomsday events. Loki identifies the location as an apocalyptic event in Alabama in the year 2050. Mobius discusses the mission with the judge. Ravonna expresses her concerns for Loki, which Mobius responds to with enthusiasm for catching the variant. Ravonna reluctantly approves the mission but tells him there won't be much she can do if it doesn't work. The lead hunter B-15 identifies the event as a Class 10 apocalypse. The team arrives in Haven Hills as a cataclysmic storm is tearing through the area. The team arrives and enters a Rockstar superstore. B-15 orders Mobius to leave Loki with her. Loki agrees, much to Mobius' chagrin. In the surveillance room, the variant watches and sets a timer. Loki attempts to talk to B-15, but she silences him. They approach a customer, taking advantage of the store's hurricane sale. Loki advises B-15 to interrogate the customer, as it might be the variant. The customer grabs B-15, placing the green mind control spell on her before fainting. The spell causes B-15 to act as an avatar for the variant, who engages Loki in conversation. The variant confirms its identity as a Loki. Mobius and his team come to a shelter within the store, where one of the hunters frantically begins to search a bag. When Mobius confronts him, another hunter arrives with news that he found C-20, the captured hunter from before. She is sitting in a room terrified, mumbling, "It's real." Loki discusses the situation with his variant before she passes the spell onto a store employee, and then promptly faints. Loki now challenges his variant to show his true form rather than hide behind innocence. Loki proclaims his intention to overthrow the timekeepers. The variant's avatar expresses his disinterest while the real variant sets a reset charge. Mobius speaks to C-20, who tells them that she told Loki where the timekeepers are. B-15 wakes up and looks around, appearing afraid. Loki catches the variant's reset charges but is attacked by a much larger avatar. The two fight as Mobius and B-15 reunite. The variant sets another timer as Loki gets up to confront the avatar as the variant removes his mind control from it. Behind the avatar, the variant reveals itself as a female Loki, who sends the reset charges to different locations in time before detonating. This creates several Nexus events. The TVA witnesses all this, causing all hunters, Minutemen, and even the judge go into action. The variant opens a time panel and waves to Loki as she walks through it. Mobius and the team run to Loki demanding he wait for them. But Loki follows his variant into the panel. Episode 3, Lamentis. Disclaimer 6.23.21. Unless and until the female Loki is revealed to be Sylvie Lushton, a mortal from the comics who is gifted Loki's powers after Ragnarok. She will be identified in my spoilers as Lady Loki, a completely different character. Other times, the term, the variant, will be interchanged. Marvel Studios logo to a modern upbeat theme. C20 and Lady Loki sit in a restaurant, dressed casually, enjoying their frozen Mai Tais. Lady Loki remarks as to how brain freeze can lock memories in place and coaxes C20 into drinking quickly, causing the sensation. She takes advantage of the situation and asks C20 how many people are guarding the timekeepers. Recognizing that she is in an illusion, C20 attempts to engage the variant, but she manages to find out how to access them. In the department store, C20, unconscious and under mind control, tells her the elevators to the timekeepers are gold. She notices Loki and the TVA on the surveillance monitors. Title sequence. The variant enters the TVA through a panel and attempts to use her mind control on a Minuteman. It doesn't work and the soldier attempts to prune her. She takes his weapon and prunes him instead. 3 more soldiers attacks her, but she defeats them. Loki appears from the panel and realizes he is in the TVA locker room. Loki walks through the hallways with 2 daggers as the variant approaches the gold elevator. Loki approaches her and she brushes off the engagement but brandishes a sword. The 2 fight until Judge Renslayer appears with 2 soldiers. As the variant takes Loki hostage, he uses a TemPad device to open a panel to an undisclosed location. The variant expresses disgust with the title of Loki, as the main one uses his powers. As the 2 are about to engage, it is revealed they are on the planet Lamentis-1. In the year 2077, during a meteorite storm preceding the cataclysmic impact of its moon, after running to a safer location, the variant takes advantage of Loki by trying to take control of his mind. Loki tells her his mind is too strong, and offers a truce, since he has hidden the TemPad. She tells him that he interrupted a plan that was years in the making. She suggests they draw power from the moon in order to recharge the TemPad to get him off Lamentis-1. The variant identifies herself as Sylvie. Loki tries to analyze Sylvie's plan, which seems to be to wipe out all of existence in a grip for power. The 2 search for a place to recharge the device, and finally come upon a standalone house. Sylvie kicks in the door and is immediately knocked back by a pulse generator. Loki apologizes for the intrusion, and the woman kindly accepts but denies them entry. Seeing a picture, Loki makes himself look like her dead husband in an effort to appeal. But she ain't buying it, so she zaps him, too. She identifies the 2 as devils, before stepping out with her pulse generator. She tells them that the rest of the people are on the evacuation vessel. She tells them how to get there. At the train station, Loki disguises himself as a guard to bring Sylvie onto the train. Though another guard doesn't buy it, Sylvie mind controls him into letting him on. The 2 briefly argue before discussing each other. Loki tells Sylvie about how Frigga would teach him magic as a child. Sylvie barely remembers her mother, and concedes to Loki's prowess with his abilities. She tells him that she taught herself magic. Siley shares the story of a relationship she had with a postman during the early days of her plan. Loki admits to never being in love. She reminds him that they are going to use this civilization's only hope to recharge the TemPad. Before taking a nap, she wakes to Loki singing along with the band in the dining cart. A patron leaves as Loki takes a solo, looking into Sylvie's eyes as he does, before clapping the rest of the patrons and staff into a dance. Toasting a drink to Sylvie, she scolds Loki and tells him of her suspicions that others were looking at her, and that he is back in his variant jacket and not in disguise. Guards enter and take on Loki and Sylvie. ultimately throwing him off the train. Sylvie demands the TemPad from Loki. He reveals a destroyed device, and the two argue over their impending doom. Before sitting down, Sylvie tells Loki that the Ark evacuation vessel never leaves the planet. So Loki suggests they hijack the Ark to ensure it gets off the planet. On the way, Sylvie tells Loki how she controls minds. She tells Loki that all TVA hunters and Minutemen are variants from different realms and timelines. Loki realizes that the Timekeepers did not create the TVA agents as Miss Minutes said in Episode 1. He also realizes that the agents, hunters, and Minutemen are not aware of their true identities. The two arrive at the Ark, and Loki realizes the people are going to be left to die. They attempt to run around the crowd but are interrupted by the impact of the moon. The vessel is ultimately destroyed as the two watch on. Episode 4, The Nexus Event. Open on flashback to Asgard, where a child Loki is arrested as a variant by Minutemen who set off a reset charge, which prunes the child's toy, indicating that the toy, and presumably the child, both did not belong in that time period. The child is brought before the TVA and processed in the same way Loki was. In trial, the child steals the hunter's TemPad and escapes into a panel. The hunter is revealed to be Ravonna Renslayer. She is next seen entering the room of the Timekeepers. Title sequence. Ravonna meets Mobius and the two discuss the situation. The variant Sylvie was at the elevator to the Timekeepers along with the Loki variant Mobius was allowed to bring. Loki. Mobius asks to speak with C20. Since she was enchanted by Sylvie in Episode 2. Ravonna tells him that C20 is dead. Ravonna tells Mobius that after she was brought back, she declined rapidly and died. She then asks him to keep it between them. She tasks him with finding the rest of the variants. On Lamentis I. Sylvie sits in preparation for her doom as Loki slowly approaches her. Loki apologizes to Sylvie. She tells him about her memories of Asgard. Sylvie claims that her birth as the goddess of mischief was enough to cause the TVA to arrest her. She claims to have stolen a TemPad and run before she could face trial, and has been running ever since. Everywhere she goes sets off a Nexus event.